I still remember the exact words that started it all. Man, you know your way around the gym. Think you could help me out with my workouts? That was Alex, my best friend since high school, the guy everyone described as straightforward, dependable, and unmistakably straight. We had known each other for years, but until that moment, I never thought our paths would cross in such an intimate way. He said it so casually, as though he was asking me to grab a drink after work, but I felt my chest tighten. I had been attracted to him for as long as I could remember, though I kept it locked away behind jokes, easy laughter, and the kind of friendship that didn't invite suspicion. Alex had a girlfriend, Emily, and they'd been together for nearly 3 years. She was kind, thoughtful, and often joined our group outings. Whenever I saw them together, I reminded myself where the boundaries stood. Still, when Alex asked for my help, I couldn't say no. The first session was at the gym near his apartment, a place I already knew well. I arrived early, determined to keep everything professional, to push down the voice inside me that wanted more. He walked in wearing a sleeveless shirt, shoulders broad, grin easy, and for a second I wondered if I had made a mistake. "All right, coach," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Don't go too hard on me." I forced a laugh. "Trust me, I'll ease you in." We started with simple stretches, then basic weight training. I adjusted his posture, correcting the angle of his arms, pressing lightly against his back to guide him. Every touch felt like a spark, though I masked it with a steady, instructional tone. "Keep your core tight," I said, moving his elbow just an inch. "Like this?" he asked, holding my gaze a little longer than necessary. I nodded quickly and looked away, swallowing the moment. He didn't mean anything by it. I was the one reading into things as usual. Over the next few weeks, our sessions became routine. He texted me after work, "You free tonight?" And I often was. The gym became our space, a place where laughter mixed with the clatter of weights and the occasional grunt of effort. He teased me when I corrected him too much. I teased him when he struggled with a set, and it all felt natural. But underneath, something was shifting. I noticed how often he touched me in small ways, an elbow nudge when he wanted my attention, a hand on my shoulder when he thanked me. At first, I dismissed it. Alex was always tactile, always friendly. Yet sometimes his hand lingered just a second too long, and it was enough to stir doubts I fought to ignore. One evening, as we packed up, he mentioned Emily. "She's been on my case about the time I spend at the gym," he said, tossing his towel into his bag. "Says I should be home more." I nodded slowly. "She probably just misses you." "Yeah," he replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "Still, I like this. It feels good, you know? Having something that's mine." His words caught me off guard. Something that's mine. For a moment, I wondered if he meant me, if this space we had carved out together felt more than just about lifting weights. I bit back the thought, reminding myself of Emily, of the boundaries that tethered us to reality. As I walked home that night, I replayed his words. Maybe he only meant the gym, the routine, the small escape from his relationship. Yet, I couldn't shake the warmth in his tone when he said it. Weeks stretched on, and I grew more conflicted. I cherished the way he trusted me, the way he laughed at my dumb jokes, the way his eyes seemed to linger when I demonstrated a move. But every time he mentioned Emily, her texts, her plans, her expectations, I felt the invisible wall rise between us again. Still, in those quiet moments when it was just us, weights clinking in the background and sweat dripping down our foreheads, it felt like we were balanced on the edge of something unspoken. I knew I shouldn't imagine it. I knew the rules. He was my friend. He was taken. He was straight. And yet there were times when his hand brushed mine as I handed him a water bottle, or when his laugh seemed to soften as his eyes locked on mine, that I wondered if I was wrong about him. That thought stayed with me, unsettling and intoxicating. Because if I was wrong, if Alex wasn't as untouchable as I believed, then everything between us was about to change. Our workouts became more than a routine. They became a ritual. Every other night, Alex and I moved through the motions, warm-ups, reps, stretches, but beneath it all, a tension simmered, steady and unspoken. I had promised myself that I would treat it as nothing more than training, But each session pulled me further into dangerous territory. Alex began to confide in me more, not just about the weights or the burn in his muscles, but about his life with Emily. She says, "I've been distracted lately," he muttered one evening as we sat on the gym mats after finishing our sets. I don't know, maybe she's right. I tossed him a bottle of water, trying to keep my tone even. Everyone goes through phases. Maybe you just need space. Yeah, maybe. He unscrewed the cap, tilting it back. A drop of water clung to his lower lip before sliding down his chin. He didn't wipe it away. For reasons I didn't dare admit, I couldn't look away. Moments like that became more frequent, small cracks in the structure of our friendship. I noticed the way his eyes searched mine when we laughed, or how he sometimes leaned too close when I corrected his form. His touches weren't accidental anymore, though they were always light enough to be denied. One night, we trained at his apartment because the gym was closed for renovations. His living room was cluttered with improvised equipment, dumbbells by the couch, resistance bands tied to a doorframe. The air smelled faintly of his cologne, warm and musky. "Sorry about the mess," he said, kicking aside a pair of sneakers. "This is more personal, right?" I shrugged, but my chest tightened. Personal was dangerous. We worked through push-ups and planks until sweat ran down his arms. He collapsed onto the floor, breathing hard, and I dropped beside him. For a moment, silence filled the space, broken only by the sound of our breaths. "Man, this is tough," he said, turning his head toward me. His face was flushed, eyes glinting with something I couldn't name. "Don't let me quit, okay?" "I won't," I answered softly. The words hung between us, heavier than any weight we had lifted that night. As the weeks passed, Emily became a more frequent subject, not in ways that sounded affectionate but frustrated, detached. "She doesn't get it," he said once during a late-night set of curls. "She wants me to settle into this routine. Work, dinner, bed. No space for me. No space for this." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. And though he didn't clarify what this meant, my pulse raced at the possibility. I reminded myself he was vulnerable, venting, maybe exaggerating his discontent. Yet each time he shared a frustration, I felt him leaning further toward me, as if I was becoming the alternative to everything he found suffocating. One evening, after an intense workout, I stretched his arm behind his back to ease the tension in his shoulder. My hand lingered a second too long. He didn't move away. "You're good at this," he murmured. His tone was low, almost intimate. I withdrew quickly, pretending not to notice. Just practice. But my heart was pounding. The shift was undeniable. Our banter carried an undercurrent now, teasing words laced with suggestion, pauses that stretched just enough to feel deliberate. Then came the moment that unraveled everything. It was late, nearly midnight, after a grueling session. We sat side by side on the gym bench, exhausted. His knee brushed mine and stayed there. He didn't move. Neither did I. "You ever think about crossing lines?" he asked suddenly, voice hushed as though speaking to himself. My breath caught. "What do you mean?" He turned, his eyes fixed on me, unguarded in a way I had never seen before. The silence stretched until the air itself seemed to vibrate. And then, without another word, he leaned in and kissed me. Quick, uncertain, but real. I froze, my mind screaming with contradictions. He was straight. He was taken. He was my best friend. But when he pulled back, looking startled by his own actions, the only thing I could think was how desperately I wanted more. The kiss had lasted seconds, yet it left an echo I couldn't silence. We both sat there in stunned silence, pretending the world hadn't just shifted under our feet. When he finally stood and muttered, "I should go," I didn't stop him. That night, I lay awake, replaying the kiss, the tremor in his voice, the weight of his knee against mine. For the first time, the boundary we had clung to wasn't just fragile, it was broken, and I knew, deep down, that once a line is crossed, it can never be redrawn. The morning after the kiss, I half expected Alex to call, to explain it away, to laugh it off as a moment of exhaustion or misplaced gratitude. But my phone stayed silent. I told myself it was better that way, that maybe pretending nothing had happened would protect what was left of our friendship. Yet 2 nights later, he texted, "Jim." When I walked in, he was already there, leaning against the squat rack like nothing had changed. His smile was casual, his tone light, but I noticed the flicker in his eyes when they met mine. Neither of us mentioned the kiss. Instead, we moved through the exercises as if following a script, though the pauses between sets stretched longer, the silences sharper. During a stretch, my hand brushed his wrist. He didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers curled, almost gripping mine before he quickly let go. My chest tightened. It was happening again, in the spaces between words, in the touches that lasted just long enough to carry meaning. Still, the shadow of Emily loomed. He mentioned her less, but when he did, it was always with a tone of distance. "She thinks I've been distracted," he said once, voice low, as though confessing a crime. I wanted to ask, "Is it me?" But the word stayed locked behind my teeth. The next time we met, it was at his apartment again. He opened the door in a plain t-shirt and sweatpants, hair damp from a shower. The sight was disarming. We tried to stick to the workout plan, but the energy was different, charged, restless. After a few half-hearted sets, he dropped onto the couch with a groan. "Forget it," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I can't focus." I sat beside him, heart pounding. "What's on your mind?" He didn't answer right away. He stared ahead, jaw tight, then turned to me suddenly, eyes searching mine. "I don't know what's happening with me." Before I could respond, his hand was on my face, pulling me into another kiss. This one wasn't hesitant. It was hungry, deliberate, and it stole the air from my lungs. When we finally pulled apart, the room felt different, like we had stepped into a version of reality that couldn't be undone. His forehead rested against mine, breath unsteady. "I shouldn't," he whispered. "I'm with her." "I know," I said, my voice barely audible. But neither of us moved away. What followed was a blur, hands, heat, confessions whispered in the dark. It wasn't just physical, it was the culmination of weeks of tension, of secrets pressed into silence. Every boundary we had drawn crumbled that night, and when it was over, we sat in the quiet, both of us staring at the floor as though it might offer answers. The guilt came quickly, sharp, and undeniable. He dressed in silence, his face unreadable. "This can't happen again," he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. I nodded, though part of me already knew it was a promise neither of us could keep. Days turned into weeks, and the secret became a weight we carried together. At the gym, our banter returned, but underneath it lived an unspoken truth. His touches grew bolder, his texts more frequent, late-night messages that skirted around what we both wanted but couldn't name. Emily noticed. She didn't say it outright, but I saw the suspicion in her eyes the few times we crossed paths. Alex grew restless, torn between two worlds, the life he had built with her and the hidden one he was building with me. I told myself I was only taking what he offered, that I wasn't the one breaking anything, but in the quiet of my own thoughts, I knew better. I was complicit in a betrayal that felt as intoxicating as it was destructive. One night, after another stolen moment, Alex lingered at the door. His expression was conflicted, almost pained. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. The question lodged in my throat. I thought of Emily, of the years they had shared, of the trust we were dismantling piece by piece. But I also thought of the way his eyes softened when they met mine, the way he reached for me when no one else could see. "No," I said finally. His shoulders relaxed, though his smile never came. He nodded once, then left, the sound of the door closing echoing louder than it should have. As I sat alone, I realized we were no longer just friends, no longer just trainer and trainee. We were something dangerous, something fragile, built on secrecy and desire. And I couldn't tell if we were heading toward ruin or toward something that might change us both forever. After that night at his apartment, nothing between us returned to normal. We still worked out together, still went through the motions of friendship, but underneath, everything was a raw, unspoken truth. We had crossed into a place where neither of us belonged, and yet neither of us wanted to leave. Alex avoided looking at me for long stretches, only to slip in glances that carried too much weight. I learned to read the silence between his words, the hesitation in his voice. When Emily called during a session, he'd step outside, speak softly, then return with a guarded expression that unraveled whenever his eyes met mine. The duality of his life became sharper. With Emily, he played the role of the devoted boyfriend. With me, he allowed himself moments of vulnerability he couldn't afford anywhere else. And I, despite every voice in my head warning me of the consequences, let him. One evening, while we stretched on the gym mats, he broke the silence. "I feel like I'm living two lives," he said quietly. I glanced at him, unsure if he wanted comfort or confession. "And which one feels real?" His eyes lingered on me, heavy with meaning. He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. That night, instead of parting ways after our session, he suggested a walk. The city was quiet, streetlights casting pools of yellow across the pavement. He walked close, his arm brushing mine every so often, until finally he stopped under a flickering light. "I don't know how long I can keep this up," he admitted, voice breaking. "With her. With you. With all of it." I swallowed hard, torn between selfishness and reason. "Then maybe you shouldn't." He searched my face, as if hoping I'd give him permission to choose me outright. But I couldn't. The weight of what we were doing pressed down on me, reminding me that this wasn't just about passion, it was about betrayal. Still, when he reached for my hand in the dim glow of the street lamp, I didn't pull away. Weeks passed, and our secret world grew. He found excuses to see me outside workouts, errands, late-night drives, quiet dinners where conversation blurred into laughter and touches no one else could see. Each moment felt intoxicating, a drug I couldn't quit, even as guilt clawed at me. Emily's presence became ghostly, haunting our time together. He never spoke of her in detail anymore, and I never asked, though the silence made me complicit. When her name appeared on his phone, I looked away, pretending it didn't matter. But it did. The more Alex leaned on me, the clearer it became that our connection wasn't fleeting. It wasn't just about temptation or stolen kisses. It was about need. He needed me in ways he couldn't articulate, and I selfishly needed him just as much. One night, after another stolen embrace, he whispered against my skin, "What are we doing?" I wanted to tell him we were ruining everything. I wanted to tell him we were playing with fire, and eventually someone would burn. But instead, I said, "We're figuring it out." Because admitting the truth that we were lost in something neither of us could control would have made it real. The tension built, threading through every encounter. He grew more daring, pressing a kiss to my neck while we waited for an elevator, squeezing my hand beneath a table when friends sat just inches away. The risk made my pulse race, but it also painted a target on us. Secrets, after all, have a way of unraveling. And though we both pretended otherwise, we knew the unraveling had already begun. The night it all nearly came crashing down, Emily called while we were together. Alex answered, voice clipped, excuses tumbling out of him. I sat frozen, listening to the one side of their conversation, heart hammering. When he hung up, he looked at me with panic in his eyes. "She knows something's off," he whispered. We didn't speak after that. The silence between us was suffocating, heavy with the knowledge that the walls were closing in. As I left that night, my chest ached with equal parts dread and longing. I knew we were standing at a precipice. Either he would choose to step back into the life he had built with her, or he would leap into the uncertain, dangerous one we were creating together. And whichever choice he made, I knew I'd already gone too far to walk away unscathed.